Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Liverpool Transfer Show on Football Talk Podcast. My name is Ozzy, and I'm your host for this evening. The rumour mills hasn't stopped for Liverpool one bit. Another breaking news that broke the net earlier on this morning, and that was the news that Liverpool apparently are in talks to sign Hugo Ekitike. So during the show, we'll discuss the player in terms of the profile. Does he fit the way we want to play? And I'll also give you my verdict in terms of if Ekitike is the right signing for us. So what we'll do now, we'll present the tweet that got our attentions earlier this morning. And this was the tweet right here. So Florian Plettenberg, also known as Pletigo, who's quite reliable and very well known in the Twitter world. His tweet, and I'll say it out loud, the next big target from the Bundesliga. Understand Liverpool are now seriously in the race for Hugo Ekitike. Talks have taken place. Slot Edwards keen on him. The biggest rival at the moment, Chelsea. Eintracht Frankfurt have not yet received an offer. Marcus Crochet still demanding 100 million euros, which is 84 million pounds, which is quite a huge price to be fair. And then later on this afternoon, he said more on Hugo Ekitike with Chelsea are currently in concrete talks over him. I understand Chelsea would like to complete the deal as quickly as possible as they're aware of Liverpool's interest. Chelsea are currently putting in the most effort. Liverpool are also in the race. However, departures such as Nunes or Jota are needed. Arsenal are monitoring the situation. Marcus Crochet is still demanding 100 million euros. So, in terms of the two tweets I've just mentioned, it doesn't seem to appear that it's a one horse race. And when it comes to these sort of deals, Liverpool, if they have upper hand or if they feel like they can get the player, that's when they put in the most effort. This one doesn't really give me that sort of vibe, if I'm being brutally honest. I know he's a player that we've scouted and he's a player that I've admired as well. I think he's a good talent, but I don't think he's the finished article. I think he's quite raw in his development right now. I still feel like he probably needs like another season at Frankfurt to really, establish himself and then be ready to move to a big club in the Premier League, for example. Um, the price tag for me is way inflated, if in my opinion. I would value the striker around 50, 60 million pounds. I wouldn't think he's worth any more than that. Also, if he was to sign for Liverpool, he's probably identified more as a project player rather than an established striker that fits into a team straight away. He will take time to get accustomed to the way we play and get accustomed to a new league. So for me, it's a bit of a risk to try and sign Ekitike for that price as well. I know Sesko is available for the same price, or it might even be a little bit more. I think I read 92 million pounds for Sesko, which is outrageous, and that's only because English clubs have shown interest in these players that are from the Bundesliga, so they've inflated the prices and thinking that someone's going to pay the odds. You know, Liverpool are going to pay big money on a player, and it's not Ekitike, it's going to be Florian Wirtz. And with Wirtz, it's 84 million pounds, so that's 100 million in euros. So that's a bit more justified because Florian Wirtz is one of a kind, probably the best number 10 in world football. So you're signing an accomplished and established player, despite only being 22 years of age. Ekitike for me is not quite at that stage there at the moment. But look, we'll see how this news develops. But I think it's definitely a player that we've got to keep an eye on because there aren't too many strikers available in this market, in my opinion. There are a few, which I'll name during the show, but there's not sort of a standout striker that I feel like Liverpool must go. And if there are, because there are a couple of names, I don't think they are realistic options for the team right now, which is a bit of a shame. But in terms of the profile of Ekitike, um, the best way to summarize him, he's a very similar stylistically player to uh, Alexander Isak, who of course we're being linked to. He's like a raw Isak, probably Isak that was that real Sociedad where, you can see there's huge potential there, but he just needs to polish up his finishing and that will elevate his game even further. That's the stage that Ekitike is right now. Um, stylistically, very tall player, um, strong on the ball, great first touch, very agile, great on the half turn. It takes the channel very well when required. A good finisher. I wouldn't say he's an accomplished finisher. No, he's still quite raw in certain situations, but he has great link up play for being a striker. Some strikers they're pretty much more focused on being in the box. He does have a good sort of game intelligence to drop deep when required and lay the ball off to the wide players in counter attacks and in different transitions of the game. So he's got a lot to offer in his game. And look, if we were to sign Katika, I'd be quite pleased because I do rate the player. Still have a little bit of reservations if he's the guy right now because we're on the verge of signing Verts and of other top players. Kirk is coming in hopefully. Uh, from what we've heard today, all the personal terms have been agreed. So just finalizing a few T's and I's and all that sort of stuff. Frimpong has flown into Liverpool, so he might be announced in the next day or two. That's pretty much a done deal now. So Liverpool are acquiring players in the right areas, in my opinion. The striker role for me, I feel like in my opinion, I feel like we need to get an established striker, someone that has experience and that has been scoring a number of goals for consecutive seasons, rather than a player who's, for me, had one good season, and that was this year. Um, I'm not saying he's a purple patch player or anything to that nature, but I do feel like he's a player that we could still have question marks on. If is he ready to move over to the Premier League? He's only believe he's 22 years of age. Let me just double check that. So he's quite a young striker. So he's not a player that is very much. He's 22 right now, but he'll be turning 23 next month. So he's at a good age. So remains to be seen if he does become a Liverpool player. In terms of his career journey, it's been quite interesting because he played for Reims and which is a French team, and he went out on a couple loan spells. I don't know if you guys remember when Newcastle were taken over by the Saudis. This was in October 2021. I don't know if you guys remember which player were Newcastle heavily linked with in the January window. A lot of fans will, joke around say Mbappe and those type of players. But the guy that they really, really wanted was Hugo Ekitike. That was the striker that they earmarked as someone that isn't the top guy right now, but has huge potential to really make a name for himself and could be the next guy in world football. So that's how highly Newcastle rated him. He rejected the move in the January window and ended up signing for PSG in the summer. And he was pretty much signed as Mbappe's understudy because PSG, assessed the player and they believed that he shared similar traits and similar skill sets to Mbappe. So if Mbappe was injured or unavailable, they had a striker like Ekitike who could come in and pretty much offer the same game that Mbappe possessed in the team. So that's just a bit of an interesting stat in terms of stylistically, how he's despite being a very tall player, he's very, very quick on the ball. Um, he's a player that attacks that channel. He's actually played left wings at previous clubs, 6'3", but got very quick on and off the ball. So he could be the player that we need up top because we do lack pace in our team, especially in certain areas. But for me, I'll still have some sort of reservation in terms of his finishing because I don't think he's consistent enough. He might need a few chances to score a goal. And this season, for most parts of the season, he's actually played alongside a striker, which was Omar Mamouche before he joined Man City. So that's something to you keep in mind in terms of how he plays because even for other teams, sometimes he plays as a lone striker, but can also play alongside another striker. So that might be something to ponder on later on in the show. But for me, he's definitely a player that's on the up and is definitely regarded as a hottest prospect or the next young striker coming through the ranks. I definitely prefer him to the likes of Sesko and Liam Delap. I know Liam Delap would probably cost half of the price, but I feel like Ekitike does have these qualities that can really make him become one of the top players, yeah, in world football for years to come. But you know, it's one of those things where you see the potential there, but it still feels like a bit of a risk because Liverpool are at a stage right now where the team's pretty much accomplished right now. We've just won the Premier League. We want to go again and try and do a repeat, and we don't really have the patience to sign a project striker, in my opinion, because we've had Darwin Núñez for the last 2, 3 years, and he's not delivered one bit or in any shape or form. So we don't want to sign another striker who's quite raw and thinking, we can refine him and make him into a top striker. I want someone that will come in and hit the ground running straight away. That's the type of striker that I think we need in our team now because we've got Florian Wirtz coming through soon. And, I'm not trying to jinx it, touch wood. He should be signed very, very soon. So he's already accomplished in the modern game. So we need to have a striker that matches that. We don't need a raw striker. If he's creating so many chances for that striker, but he's not banging them in, then it's back to square one. We've not addressed that or we've not improved on that position. With Darwin Núñez, pretty much does the same thing. He misses a lot of chances, and he's not clinical enough. So for me, we need to make sure that we sign a top striker this summer. In terms of Ekitike's stats, 48 appearances, 22 goals, 12 assists. So that's 34 goals, or should I say goals and assists in 48 appearances, which is a very respectable stat to be fair. He's definitely had a great season um, for his club, um, Frankfurt. So one thing that I'll present now, and then we can discuss in a bit more detail, is how would he fit in our team? So let's bring up the graphic, and then we can discuss it in a bit more detail. So here we go. So this is our current lineup, and I say current lineup because I've added some of the summer signings because these players are expected um, to join the club this summer. I've just got a comment here from Graham. Big up Graham. He says, Wet seems to be taking time. I think it's just, details have to be ironed out before they make it official. I know there's an extended window that ends, I believe, on the 1st of June, which is this Sunday. So maybe we'll hear some sort of announcement this week, but I wouldn't feel too alarmed right now. I feel like we are in the driving seat, so hopefully, we can conclude that deal very, very soon. And maybe it's already concluded, just hasn't been publicly announced. So we'll just have to wait and see. I wouldn't get too nervous. It's just, we need a bit of patience, I guess, in regards to Verts being officially announced as a Liverpool player. But back to the lineup. So this is our current formation on paper. Of course, I know we don't always play a 4-2-3-1, but it is predominantly the shape that we start a game. Um, so you got Kerkez and Frimpong on the fullback positions, and then you got. I think Verts will play more on the left. There will be a lot of games this season where he plays the number 10, but for this sort of argument, I'm going to play him on the left. So both like, providing the pressing and the intensity and energy in the team in that advanced midfield role. Salah on the right and Ekitike on the right. So that would be to the how we currently set up, and that would mean the likes of Verts coming a bit more inside, Sabozza occupying that kind of area, Salah drifting a bit more infield. So you end up having like two strikers here, I guess, to an extent. Verts, roaming around here. Then you've got the likes of Frimpong bombing down that right hand side, providing the width, and Kerkez doing the same as well. So that's why we're on the verge of signing two attack-minded fullbacks because, in my opinion, they're the players that are going to provide the width. It's not going to be Salah. It's not going to be Verts. Suppose like or Ekitike, it's going to be these two guys, and that's going to be their role. And even if their backup players, which would be Bradley on paper and also Robertson, they will do the same thing on those flanks as well. So we'll have more attack-minded fullbacks as part of our setup next season. So this could be the way, Liverpool would set up during the game, Karen Burke, McAllister in double pivot, Szoboszlai and Verts playing as attacking midfielders. And then you've got Salah inverting a bit more as a second striker and then Ekitike being the main man around the box. So that could be how, the team sets up. Um, but another thing that I was thinking about earlier on today, and I mentioned it briefly earlier on, is that Ekitike in the last 12 or 18 months, he's been playing alongside a strike partner for Frankfurt, which was, of course, Omar Mamouche. But I also watched him playing for the France under 21s, and he was playing alongside Cherki. Cherki had a bit more of a free role, so Cherki would probably play more as a number 10. But they were definitely a partnership where they were, Cherki was trying to lay him off on a number of occasions in a more central position. So he wasn't playing out wide or anything like that. So they definitely formed as a two-man attack. So that got me thinking, what if that is the way Liverpool set up next season? Because I do feel like we're going to tactically change our approach and in terms of how we play or how we set up as a team. So that's something we can definitely look into right now. And let me present the graphic for you guys. So what if the team was in this sort of shape where you've got Frimpong, Kerkez, of course, as our fullbacks, Gravenberch playing more as a traditional number 6, which is, not quite the way he's played this season. He's played in a double pivot, so it gives him, a partner to bounce off. But in this new setup, maybe because we've been so impressed with his defensive duties, that we believe that he can play in that single pivot role as the main number 6, and pretty much cover the fullbacks, So if Frimpong's gone down the flank, yeah, Gravenberch and Szoboszlai is their role to cover him um, when they're out of position, and it's on the other side as well. If Kerkez has gone down that flank, it's going to be um, S- Gravenberch and probably even McAllister um, covering him, and then you've got Wirtz being the player that has a free role to roam around the pitch. So then you have two players, covering for Kerkez in transition. So that's why I feel like this formation could actually work. Of course, the Groundback one will be slightly different to what we expect because he'll have to be a bit more disciplined in that role. He can't go flying around producing crazy tackles. He needs to be intelligent in his overall play. But from an attacking point of view, you've got Szoboszlai roaming in this area, McAllister here as well. But having a free role to roam around. Ekitike, the good thing about Ekitike is that he can attack through the channel if needed. And then Salah, because of Frimpong on that right hand side, it gives him the license to be more central, and it allows these two players in Salah and Ekitike to form a partnership up top. So this is just something that's a bit of food for thought, I guess, because I'm very intrigued into how we sell. And once we sign our players this summer, we'll have a better idea because then we'll know in terms of what profile Arne is looking at and maybe a tactical tweak in how he sell. But this is definitely a play or formation that we will play, I guess, at some course of the season, and it can work. And that's why I'm really, excited about the signing of Verts because he gives us different options. if for some reason, he's not having much luck in that central position and we need to switch it up a little bit, we can just easily do this where, you know, Verts plays on the left wing, and you've got McAllister and Szoboszlai being advanced eights together rather than in the 4-2-3-1 formation where, it's just Szoboszlai and then it's McAllister a little bit deeper. So this would be a bit more adventurous in terms of how we set up, but it can definitely help, especially against low block teams. So we've got to try and address that against next season. Uh, but I can definitely see us playing like this kind of formation where it's a bit of a diamond, especially with Salah, because I feel like the whole purpose of signing Frimpong is to allow Salah being inverted, whether it's in a 4-4-2 diamond formation or whether it's in a 4-2-3-1 formation, he's going to invert regardless. So for me, the likes of Szoboszlai, he's probably going to cover a lot of the ground and Groundberg as well behind him. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very attack minded, but that's why I feel like the striker that we sign up top is going to be key in terms of how we finish. And it's not like the team has lacked goals this season. We were the top scorers in the Premier League. I believe we scored about 85 goals, was it? Yes, it was. So, we scored a decent amount of goals. Top scorers in the Premier League. Actually, it was 86 in the end that we scored. So, top scorers in the league. So, goals haven't really been an issue for us. It's more so killing teams where we won 1-0, 2-0. There's certain games where maybe because we were so dominant, we were able to control the game. But this time around, Arsenal probably wants us to completely demolish team or kill them with passes, which was his opening quote when he first started doing training with the players in pre-season. So for me, uh, this could be a setup that we go with next year, or it can be where we still play 4-2-3-1, and it still works in terms of how we play. And I can definitely see Szoboszlai and Verts having moments where they interchange during the game because Szoboszlai can easily turn that left wing. It's not an unfamiliar role. In fact, it was one of his strongest performances before we joined the club because he played on the left wing for Red Bull Leipzig. So, that could be another option that we can see next season. So it's going to be a big summer, which goes without saying. And I'm excited in terms of how the team will set up. Now, that's how I see Ekitike fitting in if he was to join Liverpool. What's my verdict? Is he the right signing? And is he worth the price that's been quoted? Now, is he the right signing? For me, I think there's other options out there, and I will list some of the strikers I feel like we should probably, target this summer. So, Isak would be the dream signing, of course he would be, but for me, very, very unrealistic. Not expecting Newcastle to sell him this summer. Alvarez is the one that we have a slight glimmer of hope, but I don't think that's realistic either. I don't think he would want to part ways with Atletico and vice versa. He's had a great opening season for them. You do get rumors circling saying that, he's not completely happy and would be willing to move on. I don't know if I buy that, to be honest with you. I feel like that's just media outlets trying to get as many clicks as possible with, clickbait sort of titles. I don't think he's, dissatisfied with playing for the team or being at Atletico Madrid. I think he's pretty much happy there. So that signing for me, Alvarez would be an amazing signing. He would tick so many boxes. So would Isak, to be fair, and that's why for me, I've always been a bit split in terms of which striker is my preferred choice. I like both of the strikers, and I feel like whoever we would get in a dream scenario, they would definitely fit the bill because they're both accomplished and they're both, real gunmen in front of goal. So for me, that's the type of profile that I wanted us to sign. But they don't seem to be realistic targets. So I feel like there's other sort of targets that are a bit less in terms of their transfer valuation and should be a bit more attainable than the other two that I mentioned. So I'm speaking about the likes of Osimhen. I know strong rumors circulating that he's on the verge of signing at Saudi, but it's not complete, it's not official. So maybe we can try and have a discussion player because I feel like I know he's had a great season with Galatasaray and it's the Turkish league, so it's not the most competitive league in Europe. But you know what he's been producing for Napoli. He is an absolutely clinical, a killer in front of goal, the killer that we need in front of goal. And I feel like he would add a different dimension to our team, scoring different types of goals, headers, tap-ins, uh, goals from outside the box. Like he's got everything in his locker. I think he's available for around £60 million. That's his release clause. The salary, of course, he demanded a big salary, but I'm sure that's something the club can address. Another player that I feel like is a bit more attainable as well is Victor Gyökeres from Sporting. Uh, you know, some fans have a bit of PTSD when we speak about Gyökeres only due to the fact that you know he's in the Portuguese league and we signed Nunes from the Portuguese league. So just because he's been banging the goals there, are we going to get another Nunes 2.0? I don't think that's the case. I've watched Gyökeres quite a few times, and he's not a Nunes type of player. Even in terms of the numbers, his numbers are a lot higher than what Nunes had at Benfica, and I feel like he's a bit more direct in comparison to Darwin Nunes, and he's a better finisher. Like he's a very clinical finisher. So I believe he's available for around 50, £60 million, which definitely it seems attainable. He's a bit older. I think he's in mid-20s, so a bit more accomplished at this stage. And when you're scoring 60 goals in a season, you've got to have some sort of knack of hitting the back of the net. So I know it's different leagues, but I think that's probably more of a risk worth taking because 60 million isn't crazy in this day and age. But you know, he's definitely a player that I feel like is ready to make that step up at a high level, in my opinion. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens because there has been rumors circulating that Arsenal want him, Liverpool are looking into him as well. So wouldn't be surprised if United are back into the mix because they definitely need to address a lot of positions and due to Amorim being his former coach, it could be, where they are reunited again. So um but let's see. Um those are the two that I would like us to target. So that's four players gone there. An experienced option would be Jonathan David on a free transfer if we don't have the finances to buy a striker. But he's not a signing that would move me. He would be more of a stopgap signing for us to sign an Isak on Alvarez next summer. So I'm talking 2026. So if that's something the club want to do, I wouldn't be completely against it. But if we were able to sign Verts, Kerkez, Frimpong, sign a midfielder like a Wharton or a Stiller, and let me be a bit more greedy and maybe sign a Cherky as well, then I'll be satisfied with not signing a top striker. I'll be satisfied of having a Jonathan David in a team because he's not easy on the eye in terms of he doesn't score spectacular goals, but he's a clinical finisher. He gets the numbers, so maybe that's the type of striker we need. Just someone that taps it in more than anything else. And then after that, you've got your list of strikers that are young and up and coming, or what I would regard as your project strikers. So you've got the like of Sesco's, your Ekitikes, and your Liam Delaps. Those are the three that we've been heavily linked with. Out of the three, I'd go for Ekitike, then possibly Liam Delap, and then Sesko. Sesko gives me Nunez vibes, and that's not what I want in our team. So who knows? But in terms of Ekitike, would he be a great signing for Liverpool? If that is the guy that the club believe he's the one, and then he's the one that's going to take us forward in the short term and long term, then I wouldn't be disappointed. I think he's a good player. I do like him. I do rate him. I just want a bit more of an accomplished striker in our team. But if they've gone down the route where, because we're all speaking in hindsight here, maybe the names that I mentioned earlier on, the four names of those established strikers, maybe they're not available, or Liverpool aren't able to get those deals done. So we have to look at Plan B, and that is to find a project striker to that extent. So in that case, then Ekitike for me is top of the bill in that sort of criteria. He is probably the better out of the three that I mentioned earlier on. So that's my take in terms of Ekitike. But what for me is a bit of a stumbling block, and it shouldn't really be the case. But when you support Liverpool, you end up counting the numbers and becoming an accountant all of a sudden. is the transfer fee involved. You know, 100 million euros, which is 84 million pounds. That seems very, very high. I'm not gonna lie. I would rather, as I mentioned, not the best option. I'd rather go for Jonathan David on a free transfer and save that money to use on an Alvarez or an Isak next year, because I don't know if he's worth that price. I would probably pay maximum 50, 60 million for Ekitike. I don't think he's worth more than that. So feel free to drop a comment, let me know what you guys think. But for me, yeah, he's not worth that price. The president's really trying to milk it as much as possible because he knows the English clubs are interested in their star striker. And with Chelsea looming around and apparently holding talks with the player as well, they might be more favourites to sign him because they're willing to spend money recklessly in that way. So if that's the case, I wouldn't, lose sleep over it, but I would like Liverpool to still address that position and sign a top striker. So let's see what happens. Talks have begun according to rumors. So let's see how this news develops. Um, and yeah, that's my thoughts and analysis on Hugo Ekitike. Just going to go through some of the comments there before we close the show. Adam, big up Adam. He says Verts false nine, Gakpo Salah in front of and Dom, Mac behind, going back as a DM. Overall, I think 4-1-2-1. So Verts false nine, okay. Gakpo Salah in front. Oh, as a double. Okay, fine. As your two, okay. Dom Mac behind with Graham as a DM, yeah. So okay, so that's a diamond formation. So let me bring that up for you so it's easier to present. So you've said, so you're not even wanting Ekatike really. So in this situation, you'd rather have Gakpo ahead of Ekatike, which I kind of understand because of course Gakpo is the more experienced player. Um, which it makes sense, but for me, Gakpo in this scenario, I would probably give Ekatike, the benefit of the doubt that he's a new signing, and spent all that big money on him. So I'm expecting him to be in the starting lineup. No point of spending that much money and then not have him in the lineup. But Gakpo would be a great sort of backup or player challenging for that role. And you have Jota, I think, will end up staying in that scenario, being a backup for Salah. I think Luis Diaz will end up leaving. I think there's strong rumors circulating today that Saudi are, very, very interested in signing Luis Diaz. So he looks like he could be on the way out of the club. And then Darwin Núñez, his destiny has basically already been sealed. He's on the verge of leaving at some point this season. So, but yeah, no, thank you for your comment there. I think it works either way. But the setup for me, this is going to be an interesting one if we end up playing in this way because I think it can actually work. But then we can also revert to a 4-2-3-1 or as a 4-3-3, and that's the beauty in terms of how we play as a team. And of course, Arne Slot being a real tactician because he's shown elements of that this season. But I feel like he's got more levels to showcase when he gets his type of players or his sort of profile players that he wants in the squad. Because if he gets the players that he needs in this summer, I'm expecting there to be more squad rotation and players not getting exhausted or feeling jaded as the season goes on. So it's an exciting season for us next season for us. Um, Alan Cherney's comment is Victor Joker is going to be 27. Is that correct? Let's have a look. Gyökeres. Yeah, you're right. So he's going to be 27 literally next week. So 27. And I'm just seeing a headline here that Sporting are telling interested clubs that Gyökeres not leaving for less than 80 million euros. So let's see how much is that in pounds. That's 67 pounds. Yeah, 27 is not the age group that we normally go for, if I'm being brutally honest. But in football terms, it's not a bad age because then you're expecting the player to really hit their prime, at 28, 29, 30. So 67, it's a little bit higher. But if Ekitike is worth a lot more, and there's not a lot of guarantee because at least Jokeris has been producing it uh, for some time now. Um, you also said that in the Premier he struggled at Brighton. I don't even know he plays for Brighton. Is that the case? I know he's at Coventry. Um, so for me, that felt like, because he was at Coventry, it gives him. Yeah, he was at Brighton. Oh wow, how many goals did he score for Brighton? He didn't actually make any appearances, so he was signed by Brighton, but he was loaned out to St. Pauli, Swansea City, and Coventry. Coventry is where I think, he made his name and then signed there permanently. And then that's when, you know, the scouts all over Portugal got alerted and then Sporting ended up signing him. So yeah, of course he was probably younger at the time. So, we'll give him that benefit of the doubt. He joined them 2018, which is 7 years ago. So he was there as a 20-year-old, or 19-year-old because he's 26 right now. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but I, I would prefer to have a more experienced striker at this stage. I don't think we need to sign a young and up-and-coming striker. Um, so I would go for Gyökeres instead of Ekitike. But if we were to sign Ekitike, I wouldn't be, mad about it whatsoever. Sam Lewis says, take Smalls out of the team. Bro is not starting in that cam position over Verts. Was that the other formation that was saying? Uh, this is the formation I think I'm throwing. Uh, this was me just giving you an example to the how both three players can set up. So I actually feel like suppose I can play in that left wing position. So um, if you watch the way Verts plays, I've been watching a lot of compilations, as I'm sure you guys are doing as well. He gives me Coutinho vibes, and Coutinho's best role in our team was coming from the left. Like he's not going to be an out and out winger on that left hand side. He's going to be more of a left-sided attacking midfielder. That's going to be his type of role, where he's a bit more inverted and he's going to make sort of diagonal runs inside the box. So I think that's the way we would set up. But with Sabozla, you've got a runner there. So on paper, in that previous formation there, on paper he's there. But in fact, what will happen is that Salah goes a bit more inverted. Sabozla ends up occupying this area, and Verts will be doing this because you have Kirkes on that side. So that's just a static formation. But in terms of how the game is played, I'm expecting him to cover the byline and Verts being a bit more central. So it ends up being where both of them are playing as advanced midfielders, and then you end up having Salah a bit more inside alongside our new striker, which on paper I guess could be Ekitike, and then you'll have Frimpong and Verts, bombing down that right hand side. So that's why I feel like we're signing two attacking fullbacks to provide a width in our team. That's why we're going for those two profiles. Um, and then Grim Reaper says, I still think Liverpool need another centre back and defensive midfielder unless um, Stefan Bashir gets a chance next season. I think Bashir will get a chance next season, but I would still like us to add another player on top of that because on paper, then you'll have Gravenberch, McAllister, Jones, Endo, and then Bashir. That would be your five. I would like us to have six players. I would like to have another midfielder there. Just because I feel like all of these players will be solely focusing on playing in that double pivot. In fact, Jones will probably be. Do you know what? Jones might even be more of a backup for Szoboszlai, or should I say, Verts in that number 10 role next season because Harvey I think will be leaving the club, so we have a sort of an opening for a backup for that number 10 role. So I can see, you know, Jones challenging for that role, but then at the same time, could probably be Verts and Szoboszlai. But nonetheless, we need to add quality and depth in this squad, and I do feel like, um, Bashir, I know he's had a good season for Las Palmas, didn't have the best of time playing at Red Bull Salzburg, but nonetheless, he's. I still have reservations on Bashir. I don't know if he's Liverpool quality because there's the time when he broke into the first team, our midfielders were definitely past their best. The legs were gone, no energy or intensity or urgency in that midfield. So that's why it looked pretty obvious that, we needed reinforcement. So for me, it was um he stood out from a bad bunch to be a bit more respectable. So I don't know if he's up to that level. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. He'll definitely join us preseason. I think also will assess him and make the decision if he is going to be one of our midfielders. I don't think he'll be on the bench at all. I think he'll be a squad player. He'll be a fifth or sixth choice, in my opinion. So possibly in sixth choice because I expect McConnell to go out on loan. I expect Endo to say and to stay because he's already said out loud that he would like to stay unless he's told otherwise. And I do feel like we need more experience in our midfield because we do have a lot of young players in our team. So let's see. I really hope we do address that midfield position. At this stage, you mentioned centre back. Centre back, I think we will. With strong rumours circulating that Kwanzaa will be leaving. I think Newcastle are showing the most interest right now for around £30 million. So in that regard, we will definitely need to sign another player. Uh, Gay's a name that's been linked very strongly. Would have been Housen, but Housen is on the verge of joining Real Madrid, I believe. So let's see. There's gonna be a lot of different names being linked up, but we'll soon get a better understanding in the coming weeks in terms of who Liverpool are targeting. Prashant, big up your says I like Benjamin Sesko a bit more after watching recent clips. I've watched him live on a few occasions in the past year or two, and for some reason, whenever I've watched him play, I've not been impressed. Like he's always been mediocre. Um, in the matches I've watched, so maybe I'm a bad luck for the guy because he never delivers when I watched him live. I watched compilation; it looks decent, um, but I still feel like he's a bit raw. I would prefer Ekitike in comparison to Sesko, and they're both available around the same price. In fact, I mean Sesko is available for £92 million, which is it's that's outrageous. That's not even a position where we would even negotiate. Because for me, that is a crazy price. So yeah, we're better off walking out of that room very, very swiftly. Grim says, I read Real Madrid want Kanate to run down his contract to join them. Is this player tapping up? And there should be rules prevent this type of unhanded behavior by clubs like Madrid. 100% because it happens too much now, and Real Madrid are the main force that conduct this unethical behavior. So we're losing Trent Alexander-Arnold due to him being tapped up, and some people say, "Oh, that's not the case." It definitely is. He's definitely had discussions in the past year or two, and that's why it's not a coincidence that players run down their contract and they sign on free transfers. It's not. I know back in the day, Real Madrid would sign Galacticos and spend big money on those players, but they've realized that we can't. As in, I'm saying we, but as in Real Madrid will say that they can't challenge the likes of English teams like Man City and Liverpool and Man United in terms of transfer fees because it's too much uh, to compete with. So they've come up with a new sort of method to speak to those players because clubs do it. Whether we like it or not, every club do it. We probably do it as well. So every club has those discussions with agencies just to kind of get an idea of if their client would want to move over or have any interest in joining their club. Otherwise, you'd never place a bid on a player because you can't just place a bid cold in a cold manner and then think the player's just going to join like that. You need to get that feeling that he'll be interested in a move, and you can also do your research in terms of his profile. Does he have the right characteristics and all that sort of stuff? So clubs do it in different ways, but Madrid do it where they pretty much say to him, "Look, if you want to join Real Madrid, run down your contract for the next 2 years, and when that's done, we'll sign you then." and will promise you a big sign-on fee for yourself and for your agent, and everyone's going to be laughing all the way to the bank. That's probably their pitch right there, and it obviously has worked. It's worked for Trent. That's why despite the crocodile tears, there's definitely a bit of happiness because they've got the deal done. I'm sure obviously it's not going to be presented to the public, but they know what they've done. So I don't want to speak about Trent too much. The parade is completed now. So for me, that is a done segment now. We don't need to speak about Trent any further, even though I brought it up. But yeah, something has to happen. But when these powerful clubs are in those type of positions, unfortunately, it's not that easy to cut it out. So look at Man City. 115 charges. We're still waiting on that outcome. So it's just how the world works, unfortunately. Prashant says, hope Cody stays and Diaz. Cody, I'm confident that he'll stay. I know I saw the rumors earlier on regarding Bayern Munich want to sign him. I don't think they'll end up signing Cody Gakpo. They've earmarked a few left wingers, so they also want, or they want one of the three. I think it was Rafael Leao, Mitoma, and Cody Gakpo. So I don't think Cody Gakpo would leave Liverpool because he's in such a great position at the club, and I'm sure he's very pleased with how things are going at Liverpool. Mitoma is an interesting one because I feel like he would be fantastic for Bayern. I think he'd cook in the Bundesliga. Uh, Rafael Leao, I don't think he'd leave Milan for Germany. In my opinion, I think he'd rather stay in Milan and continue to be the main guy there. So Mitoma would likely to be the more inclined to joining Bayern in the summer. Um, Prashant said definitely would be good to have the Lone Boys all back. Yeah, a lot of them will be assessed, I guess, in preseason and see, if they have a future at the club. I know Owen Beck's had a good loan spell with Blackburn, so remains to be seen if he has a long-term future at the club. I can see him being loaned again one more time, and then if he's impressed, then he could replace Robertson if we didn't want to address that position next summer. Um, it would be good to see him play for a Premier League team because he's played for Blackburn, which is a Championship team. So if he could make that level up and play at a good level, then it's definitely something that we can you know regard as a player for the first team. So let's see. I know Jane Danz is going to come back. I think he's probably better off going out on loan again for more first team football, in my opinion. And you've got Bajtic as well. I think he'll be assessed, and we'll see what happens with him. But he's had, a good season, especially in the second half with Las Palmas. So, if he's able to bring that form back into Liverpool, he'll definitely be a good addition to the squad. Green Reaper said, it seems Carvalho hasn't had a great start at Brentford since we sold him. He looked promising when he joined Liverpool, but his career took a nosedive, and I'm hoping this won't happen to Stefan Bajtic. I think I don't mean to be rude when I say it. I think with Fabio Carvalho, I think it's more of an attitude thing rather than anything else. Um, Even when he was a Liverpool player, he made comments about his situation at the club, where he's not had much game time, and you can definitely sense sort of an immaturity in the way he talks and his sort of personality. And unfortunately, I don't think he's been guided very well in that scenario because had he been guided, to be a bit more patient and learn, from the senior players in the squad, and then eventually, you'll get your time. He still be a Liverpool player. So he's gone over to Brentford, who are very respectful and very well run club, and they've got a fantastic coach in Thomas Frank. You know, he he's probably not trained hard enough to break into the team. He's made cameos here and there. He's scored a few tap-ins here and there, but nothing, that's groundbreaking. And, Liverpool have probably capitalized on it because we end up getting around 30 million for him. So um, this is what I've learned over the years, with young players, they can be as talented as they want to be, but if they don't have the mentality or they don't have the right attitude in terms of how they present themselves in training and in matches, they won't go far in the game, unfortunately. So, and there's a lot of examples, with regards to situations like that. So I think, he's still very young. He can, you know, turn that leaf and try and change his attitude or change his whole persona into the how he sees football because a football career is not a long career. When you get into your mid 30s, that's the time where retirement is looming. So you've got to make sure that you've got a plan for the future. A lot of players they do suffer from depression after they retire from football, so or they go bankrupt. So it's something that he would need to look upon at some point in the course of his career. Um, but yeah, he definitely if he wants to play at a good level, at a higher level, at some point, he definitely needs to make adjustment, in my opinion. Um, Grim Reaper said, "What happened to Calvin Ramsey?" Unfortunately, he's been plugged with a lot of injuries in the last 2 years. He's gone to loan spells to Wigan. I think he went back to Scotland to Kilmarnock. Fortunately, he's just not had much game time, so his development has definitely stagnated, and he's pretty much become an injury-prone player. So first thing first, he needs to make sure he's injury-free, or remains injury-free for large parts of a season. And we can't even sell him because if he's not available, then who's going to buy him from us? So big sort of future, um, for Calvin Ramsey because he was, when he came in, I thought he was going to be a really good player for us. But unfortunately, we've not been fortunate to see him play in the team. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with Calvin Ramsey. I can see him returning to pre-season, but with Frimpong and Bradley in the ranks now, I don't think we need a third choice right back. So he'll probably get another loan spell. Or if there's interest from Scotland and someone to sign him, that can happen as well. Um, Uncle Ross TV, big up Uncle Ross. He says 22 people watching and only 2 likes. Everyone, stop what you're doing and smash the likes. Big up yourself, Uncle Ross. Thank you for your comment. Then, yes, please, guys, if you're watching live, please hit that like button. It goes a long way. It only takes a few seconds to hit that button. Once you do that, it will definitely help with my video, circulating all over the net, and the algorithms will improve as well. So it will just enhance the reach of this video to a wider audience. So if you can do that, really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe as well. Green Reaper says Real Madrid did this with Mbappe really good, and Trent got them to run down the contracts. Yeah, they've been doing it for a long time. So yeah, it's nothing new for us, unfortunately. Adam says, how is the goalkeeper situation going to happen next season with Allison and Mamadashvili, both top keepers, constant rotation? I don't think it'll be constant rotation. I think it'll be pretty similar to what's happening with Kelleher, where Mamadashvili will get the cup games, i.e., League Cup, FA Cup, and some of the Champions League games in the opening season. And then, you know, I I I don't want to say it, but I don't think Allison is expected to be here for a number of years. So this is pretty much us signing a goalkeeper that is going to be Alisson's successor. So he's not going to have that urgency to say, I'm going to be number one right away. He knows he's going to learn the ropes with one of the best goalkeepers in Premier League history, in my opinion. So if you're learning from someone of that ilk, you have to be a sponge in that moment. You got to soak all that information in. So once he does, decide to leave the club, you are pretty much ready to be the number one. So I don't think Mamadashvili will have that urgency to be number one right away. But he's got a fantastic mentor in Allison where he can learn off the trade and improve his game even further. So having two top quality goalkeepers, some clubs have issues with it. I know Arsenal had Raya and Ramsdale, but with Arteta, he never communicated to either of them who's number one because Raya came on loan and Ramsdale thought he was number one, but then in the end, a lot of constant rotation, as you mentioned in that comment, and unfortunately it backfired because Ramsdale went down the pecking order, lost his place in the team, lost his place for England, ends up in Southampton. That hasn't worked out well, and Ray's just blossomed in that situation. So I don't think we're going to get a repeat here. I think this is a bit more calculated, a bit more structured, and if Allison decides to leave in the next couple of years, it might be the case. But I think we've signed Mamadashvili to future-proof that goalkeeping position. So that's how I see it going on for us from next season onwards. Remember says I'd like to see Rio and Gomar make a breakthrough in the first team. So I think we'll see him a lot more in cup games. Um, so I know in the last few months he's broken into the under 23s and he's actually had a great impact for the team there. I don't want us to put too much pressure on the kid because he is an unbelievable talent. I think he could go on and really make a name for himself for years to come. But Liverpool have to be smart ahead. Just because he's doing sensational things, at that level doesn't mean he'll come into the first team and hit the ground running straight away. He's got a lot of development to do, in my opinion. So this season coming up, I think this is where he gets that education, learns to play in the under 23s because he's only 17, I believe, 16, 17. So he's playing against players that are like 5, 6 years older than him. So it's still grown man football for him. So, if he gets accustomed to that and then still plays in the Carabao Cup or in the FA Cup and makes a few cameos here and there, that will get him aligned to be ready from 2026 onwards, in my opinion. So next season, I expect him to be involved here and there. But in the following season, if he's had a great impact as we are predicting for the young man, then he could be a future star in the team. So very, very excited to see how he does. But we have to keep him grounded and make sure, he earns his stripes. And when he's ready for the first team, he will be in the team. I'm very sure of that. Grim Reaper says, seems we go through a lot of young promising players and they never live up to their billing. That's why I feel like we have to be a bit more patient, a bit more, sensible when it comes to these young players. Because we have signed young players over the years and we've built them as the next this and the next that, and it's never worked out. So, but in recent years, I feel like the club have done it really well. I know the likes of Elia and Conor Bradley, they've gone out on loan, and that's really helped with their development. So when they've returned, they've actually, done really well in the team. So maybe that's a route that some of the players might take. I think with Rio and Gamoa, I think he's a star in the making. So I don't think he'd go out on loan, but you never know. I feel like they'll want him to learn the ropes at academy slash reserve level, and then slowly embed him in the first team with small matches here and there in terms of cup games and maybe a Champions League game if we've qualified, or an FA Cup game, and then take it from there. So we've got to be patient with the kid. We can't just rush him into the team thinking he's the guy right now. Um, his body's not fully developed. He's still growing, so we've got to manage him very, very well. So hopefully he will be the guy that breaks into the team and we have another star in the making there. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to, let's go through the comments. Graham, Adam, Sam Lewis, Grim Reaper, Prashant, Anfield, what should I say? Uncle Roz now, Uncle Roz TV. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate your engagement as always, guys. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. In terms of upcoming content, I do plan on doing a transfer talk show tomorrow, of course, Liverpool related. So I will go through all the rumors that have been circulating for the last few days. If there's any breaking news, we'll speak about in the show. Um, if there's real breaking news, where we've agreed to deal with someone, then I'll do a separate show. So best thing to do is hit that notification bell so you know what time I go live. And you can also follow me at social media at Aussie.ftp on Instagram and Aussie_FTP on X/Twitter. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and I'll speak to you all very, very soon. Goodbye.